Podcast Talk.
Learn English naturally.
When people pretend everything is fine. Hi everyone, welcome to OffScript English. My name is Emily, and I'm really happy you're here with us today. This podcast is about real conversations and real emotions, and the kind of English people actually use in everyday life.
Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel. We're really glad you're listening. If you enjoy thoughtful conversation like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel, share this episode, and leave a comment. It truly helps us grow and decide what to talk about next.
Today we're talking about something very familiar to many people. About moments when someone says they're fine, when they say everything is okay, even though inside they feel something completely different.
This happens more often than we realize. At work, with friends, in families, and in quick conversations where there isn't time or space to explain how we really feel.
Saying I'm fine often feels safe. It feels easy. Sometimes it's a way to protect ourselves, and sometimes it's a way to protect other people from uncomfortable emotions.
And over time, these small moments start shaping how we communicate. We learn when to speak, when to stay quiet, and when it feels easier to hide behind simple answers.
What's interesting, it's that most people don't even notice when they do this. Saying I'm fine becomes automatic. It's almost like a social habit, something we say without stopping to think about what we actually feel.
And when you start paying attention, you hear it everywhere. Someone asks how you are, and the answer comes quickly, without hesitation. Not because everything is truly fine, but because the conversation is expected to move on.
Sometimes I'm fine really means I'm tired. Sometimes it means I don't want to talk about it right now. And sometimes it simply means I don't feel safe enough in this moment to be honest.
Understanding this can completely change how you listen to people. You stop focusing only on words and you start noticing tone, pauses, and timing. That's where real meaning often lives.
What makes this especially interesting is that people often expect honesty, but only to a certain limit. We say, "How are you?" but we don't always mean, "Tell me everything." And "I'm fine" quietly fits into that space between honesty and politeness.
Yes, and that can be confusing for people learning English. Because logically, if someone asks a question, you expect a real answer. But socially, the question sometimes has a different purpose.
In many situations, "How are you?" is more like a greeting than a question. It opens the conversation, but it doesn't always invite depth. And people learn this very early, often without realizing it.
That's why answering honestly can sometimes feel risky. You don't know if the other person has time, energy, or emotional space to really listen. Saying "I'm fine" becomes a safe default.
And this isn't about lying. Most of the time, people aren't trying to deceive anyone. They're just choosing what feels appropriate for that moment, in that specific context.
When you understand this, conversations start to feel lighter. You stop expecting every interaction to carry emotional weight. And you stop feeling disappointed when answers stay on the surface.
At the same time, this awareness helps you notice when someone actually wants to be honest. You start hearing the difference between a routine, "I'm fine," and one that sounds a little heavier.
Often the difference isn't in the words themselves, but in the pause before them or the tone of voice. These small details quietly signal whether someone is open to more or not.
Learning to hear those signals takes time. But once you start noticing them, your listening skills change completely. English stops being just a language and becomes a way to understand people.
And this is exactly why listening to real conversations matters so much. Not perfect dialogues, but natural ones. Because that's where these subtle meanings actually live.
One moment where this shows up very clearly is at work. Someone asks how you're doing, maybe in a hallway or before a meeting. And even if you're overwhelmed or exhausted, the automatic answer is still, "I'm fine." Because that moment doesn't feel safe enough for honesty.
And what's important to understand is that this answer isn't wrong. It's a social decision. You're quickly reading the situation and choosing the level of truth that feels appropriate in that exact moment.
The same thing happens with friends. Sometimes they ask how you are, but you can feel that they don't really have the space to listen deeply right now. So, I'm fine becomes a way to keep the connection without opening something heavy.
This is where misunderstandings often begin. One person thinks the conversation is neutral and light, while the other is quietly carrying much more inside. And unless you learn to notice subtle signals, that gap can grow.
What's interesting is that people rarely say this out loud. They don't explain why they answered, I'm fine. They just move on, and the moment passes, even though something important stayed unspoken.
Over time, these small, unspoken moments shape relationships. Not in dramatic ways, but quietly. They influence how close we feel to people and how safe we feel sharing what's really going on.
This is why learning to listen beyond words is so important. When you notice hesitation, a softer tone, or a longer pause, you begin to understand that I'm fine might be an invitation, not a wall.
And that invitation doesn't mean you have to push. Often it simply means staying present, staying open, and letting the other person decide if they want to go deeper or not.
When learners understand this, they stop feeling rejected by short answers. They stop assuming that something went wrong. Instead, they start reading conversations with more patience and curiosity.
And that shift changes everything. Conversation feel less stressful, more human, and more honest, even when the words themselves stay simple.
Another place where this shows up very clearly is in casual conversations, the kind that happen quickly and without much thought. Someone asks how you are while passing by, and the answer, I'm fine, becomes a social shortcut, a way to keep things moving without stopping the flow.
In these moments, people aren't looking for depth. They're following a rhythm they've learned over time. And understanding that rhythm helps you feel less pressure to always respond in a perfect or emotionally complete way.
What often surprises learners is that native speakers do this too. It's not a lack of language skills, it's a choice, a way of navigating social situations without creating discomfort.
And once you see this as a choice rather than a problem, it changes how you feel about your own English. You stop judging yourself for not saying more and you start trusting your instincts.
Sometimes people worry that answering honestly will make things awkward, and often that fear isn't about language at all. It's about timing, context, and emotional safety.
That's why listening is just as important as speaking. When you learn to notice how people answer, not just what they answer, you become more comfortable in conversations, even when emotions are involved.
Over time, this awareness builds trust. People feel less pressured, and conversations feel less forced. Even silence starts to feel more natural, rather than uncomfortable.
And that comfort allows space for honesty when it really matters. Not every moment needs depth, but when it does, the door is already open.
This is one of those skills that doesn't come from memorizing phrases. It comes from listening, observing, and allowing conversations to unfold naturally.
And once you develop that skill, English feels less like a performance and more like a shared experience, where understanding matters more than perfect words.
As you start noticing these patterns, you may realize that many conversations aren't about sharing information at all. They're about maintaining connection, protecting boundaries, and choosing the right level of honesty for that specific moment.
This perspective can feel freeing. You stop feeling responsible for fixing every moment or explaining everything you feel. Instead, you allow conversations to be what they are, without adding pressure where it isn't needed.
For many learners, this is a turning point. English stops feeling like a test you have to pass and starts feeling like a tool you can use. You're no longer focused on saying the right thing, but on responding in a way that feels human and natural.
And when you approach conversations this way, misunderstandings become less dramatic. You recognize that not every short answer is a rejection and not every silence is a problem that needs to be solved.
This also helps you be kinder to yourself. You stop replaying conversations in your head and questioning every word. You accept that sometimes, I'm fine, is simply the most appropriate answer in that moment.
Over time, this awareness changes how you participate in conversations. You listen more carefully, respond with more patience, and feel less pressure to perform or impress.
And interestingly, people often respond to that calm presence. When you're not pushing for answers or clarity, others may feel safer opening up when they're ready.
This doesn't mean every conversation will suddenly become deep or emotional, but it does mean that when depth appears, you're able to recognize it and meet it with understanding rather than confusion.
Learning to hear what's behind simple answers is a quiet skill. It develops slowly, but once it's there, it changes how you experience not only English, but communication as a whole.
And this is why we believe that listening deeply is one of the most powerful ways to improve your English. Not by learning more words, but by understanding people.
When you start allowing conversations to be imperfect, something important happens. You stop trying to manage every interaction, and instead you begin to trust the natural flow between people. That trust creates space, not only for understanding English better, but for understanding emotions without forcing them into words.
Many learners believe confidence comes from having the right phrases ready, but real confidence often comes from knowing that silence, short answers, or simple responses are not failures. They're part of how people communicate when they don't feel ready to open up.
This awareness changes how you interpret everyday interactions. Instead of searching for hidden mistakes in yourself, you begin to see conversations as shared moments where both people are choosing how much they can give emotionally.
And when you see conversations this way, English feels less demanding. You're no longer trying to decode every word, you're listening for intention, comfort, and boundaries, which often matter more than vocabulary.
This also helps you respond with more kindness. When someone says, I'm fine, you don't rush them or assume something is wrong. You simply stay present, leaving the door open without pushing it wider than they want.
Over time, this approach builds stronger connections. People feel less judged and less pressured. And when they do want to speak honestly, they sense that you're someone who can listen without fixing or interrupting.
For English learners, this is especially powerful. It reminds you that communication isn't about perfect sentences. It's about presence, timing, and the willingness to understand more than what's being said out loud.
When you develop this skill, listening becomes easier and more intuitive. You stop translating in your head and start sensing meaning naturally, the way native speakers often do without thinking about it.
This is the kind of progress that's hard to measure, but easy to feel. Conversations feel calmer. Misunderstandings feel less personal. And English slowly becomes a space where you feel more at ease.
So the next time someone says, I'm fine, try listening a little deeper. Not to analyze or judge, but simply to understand the moment for what it is without adding pressure or expectation.
And if you're the one saying, I'm fine, that's okay too. Sometimes it's exactly what you need in that moment. Understanding this gives you permission to choose what feels right.
The fact that you're listening to conversations like this already shows growth. You're training your ear, your intuition, and your emotional awareness all at the same time.
We really appreciate you spending this time with us. When you choose to listen to conversations like this, you're not just learning English. You're training your ability to notice people, to hear emotions behind simple words, and to stay present even when answers are short or incomplete.
That kind of listening takes patience. It takes slowing down and resisting the urge to immediately understand or fix everything. But over time, it changes how conversations feel, making them calmer, more respectful, and much more human.
And this is why simple phrases like I'm fine deserve more attention than we usually give them. They may sound small, but they often carry layers of meaning shaped by context, emotion, and personal boundaries.
Understanding this gives you freedom. Freedom to answer simply when that's all you can offer. Freedom to stay quiet when words feel heavy. And freedom to trust that connection doesn't disappear just because everything isn't fully explained.
This perspective also makes you kinder to yourself. You stop replaying conversations and wondering what you should have said. You accept that sometimes the most honest response is the one that protects your energy in that moment.
Over time, people sense that kind of calm awareness. They feel less pressure around you and more safety to speak honestly when they're ready. And that changes the quality of communication in ways grammar never could.
What we're really talking about here is not just English, but connection. The ability to listen without rushing, to respond without forcing, and to respect the space between words when it matters most.
Thank you for being here and for listening so thoughtfully. If this episode helped you see everyday English a little differently, then it did exactly what it was meant to do. We're really glad you're part of this journey with us on OffScript English.